Hi, welcome back to Analytical Media. We are a consortium, a group of therapists, college professors, academics, and well-published peer-reviewed authors. You can find our book on the subject of psychopathy, entitled Descent into Darkness, at Amazon.com. The book analyzes the murder of Travis Alexander by Jodi Ann Arias from the perspective of psychopathy. If you're interested in psychopathy, if you're interested in the nature of the psychopath, this is a very in-depth book. You learn everything about the murder, everything about the trial, and all of the clues that point to psychopathy as her motive for murder. Today's question is about autism and Asperger's. Please allow me to read it to you at this time. All my life I have struggled with anxiety problems and always pinned my social issues on the anxiety. However, recently I have found myself digging into my issues deeper, and I worry that this could be something else. I find it incredibly hard to socialize with other people or introduce myself to new people. I have considerable difficulties in keeping up a conversation with those people I am comfortable with. Trying to relate to other people around me or seeing something from someone else's perspective just seems like an impossibility to me. Many times throughout my life, I've had experiences of what could be called overloading, a situation in which my senses go over the top and I become incredibly sensitive to things around me, in particular sounds and lights. Lastly, I've been told many times by friends and even family at times that they wouldn't be surprised if I did have autism or Asperger's. I've taken many tests that indicate I show severe signs of both and that I should contact someone. However, I really don't like the idea, and I'm really not comfortable with calling a doctor to discuss it just because of all the implications that could come with it, especially with family and relationships. The writer has not given us enough information pertinent to the symptoms of her condition to help make an informed decision as to a diagnosis. Of course, it's impossible to diagnose someone remotely if you haven't been in personal contact with them. But we're looking at it more generally. We're not talking to this person. We're talking about someone like this person to be more informative to the listeners to this video. There aren't enough clues that she's given us. There's very little information. However, it does provide us the opportunity to recognize that if you have social dysfunction, she finds it incredibly hard to socialize with other people. She finds it incredibly hard. And really what she's saying is it produces anxiety, because she said so earlier. She said, all of my life I've struggled with anxiety problems and always pinned my social issues, her difficulty in keeping up a conversation with people, difficulty interacting with people, difficulty seeing things from a social perspective. She's always said that was due to her anxiety, but it could be that since she doesn't have any more specific, severe issues or complications to tell us or share with us, it could be that it's not the anxiety that causes the social problems. It's the social problems that causes her anxiety. In other words, does she walk around with anxiety all the time, or does her anxiety come from social arenas, social avenues, introducing herself to new people, talking to people? Do those produce anxiety, or is it the anxiety that stops her from doing it, or inhibits her, or restricts her? Traditionally, people displaying the behavior of this writer, this woman, would have been described as being introverted. Introverted people have anxiety. They're shy. they're withdrawn, and extroverted people would not have. That, by the way, is a Jungian term and concept. So if you don't think you can relate to Jung, just remember, we have long accepted the notion of introvert and extrovert, and that came directly from Jung. And at no time would someone have considered introversion to be a mental problem, and certainly nothing as serious as autism. Now, she says, I have considerable difficulties in keeping up a conversation with those people I am comfortable with, but she can do it. She said, doesn't say I can't do it, and she doesn't mention anything about anxiety now, about being overwhelmed or tongue-tied or running from the room or having a panic attack. She doesn't mention that. I think she finds it uncomfortable, as would anyone with introversion. Anyone who would have been described as an introvert would feel exactly the same way. In fact, normal people would feel that way, at least to some degree, or at least at some times they would feel that way. I mean, after all, people can be vicious, can't they? People at work, they can be vicious. People at school, they can be vicious. They can attack you in every conceivable way, humiliate you or attempt to, make jokes, bad jokes, offensive jokes about your clothing or your hairstyle, or when you slip and mispronounce a word. People can be very vicious. Children can be very vicious. So, it's long been said, and quite true, that more people, the biggest fear in life, I don't know if it's changed in the last couple of years, but before then, but the biggest fear has been public speaking, not death. Public speaking is a bigger fear than death. Once again, if you think that's not true, look it up. Look at anxiety. Look at charts of anxiety. So, most normal people would certainly feel shy and reticent in a new classroom, meeting new people. It should go away with time. And now people who are introverted or who are more introverted than normal or average would find it more difficult. They would try to avoid this situation. So she has difficulty in keeping up a conversation with those people that she is comfortable with. Practice would help. Working with a therapist would help. Just someone to help shape normal social behavior. It would help. And I would bet that if she were to force herself to have conversations with those people that she's comfortable with, even though it's difficult, it's not desirable, it's not a choice, if she did it more and more, I'd be willing to bet she'd become very good at it, and it would be very much not the anxiety-producing situation that it is now. And a therapist could help shape that social behavior, correct it, analyze it, talk about it. You know, many people who can't swim are quite frightened of the water and avoid it. It's anxiety-producing, scary to think about getting into the water, frightening to think about putting your head under the water, very frightening. But once they learn to swim, they lose that fear. If they face their fear, they go into the water, they do the things, they learn to swim, they lose their fear of the water. That terrible fear goes away. But it wasn't easy because they had all these avoidance feelings and thoughts leading up to the water. Just as this woman has those avoidance feelings and thoughts. She doesn't want to do it. People who can't swim don't want to go into the water. And people who can't swim don't understand why people are afraid of the water. She goes on to say, trying to relate to other people around me or seeing something from someone else's perspective just seems like an impossibility to me. And I can assure you that people who can't swim see swimming as an impossibility. Like it can't happen. From the beginning, people were around water and maybe took swimming classes, maybe had them at school, maybe at summer camp, maybe at the local YMCA. And they went into the water and they tried to swim. Their mother tried to teach them, their uncle, their father, the teacher, an older sibling. And it was awful easy for those people to swim. But it was impossible for the non-swimmer to swim. They didn't know how to do it. It just didn't work. And so when she says in her letter, trying to relate to other people around me, or seeing something from someone else's perspective, just seems like an impossibility to me. She doesn't know how to do it. Now, if she cares to learn how, or to appear to learn how, or to learn social interaction, she may never choose it, she may never like it, but she should be able to emulate it, which would help her in every social situation. Maybe she doesn't feel anything towards these other people, but if she can make them think that she does, it will help her socially. It's almost safe to say she does not have autism based on the fact that she's writing this letter, that she cares that she might have it. She is social enough to care what other people think of her. And people on the spectrum, people with autism, oftentimes do not care what other people think of them. They don't care about other people. And if it's bad enough, they don't acknowledge the existence of other people. The fact that she cares about this, the fact that she's afraid of upsetting the relationship of her and her friends and her family, is quite indicative of the fact that she's likely does not have autism. Let's look at this as a study, a case history, as if this is made up. However, this is a real letter that was addressed by one of our therapists. We're just looking at it in general, as if it was made up, a case study, something to look at it in class, training people to be therapists. And it's one insight we should gain from this, that people with autism, characteristically, not always, care very little about other people. And they would never be considered loving and cuddly people. They're involved in activities inside their own head, not in the outer world. And in the outer world, that's where you find other people. And in their inner world, they may be reacting quite well to other people that exist in the inner world. She mentions that throughout her life she's had these experiences of what you could call or would call overloading, where her senses go over the top and she becomes incredibly sensitive to things around her, in particular sounds and lights. This is probably moments of anxiety. These could be panic-related attacks, strong attacks of anxiety of some sort. She doesn't really tell us enough about that because she describes it as overloading, and all she really tells us about overloading is that she's incredibly sensitive to things around her, in particular sounds and lights. It's not characteristic of Asperger's or autism. I haven't mentioned Asperger's because it has nothing to do with the symptoms that she's describing. And then she mentions that she's taken many tests that indicate I show severe signs of both and that I should contact someone. However, I really don't like the idea and I'm not really comfortable with calling a doctor to discuss it just because of all the implications that would come with it, especially with family and friends. This woman's very concerned with the outside world and people that are in it. Sometimes people who are shy will outgrow it, but they don't really outgrow it. They outlearn it. They learn new ways. They learn more about the world. They learn how to swim. And for that very shy 12-year-old, 8-year-old, they could become a famous actor, talk show host, no problem at all. They learned how to do that. It's a skill. I think this is a good place to stop. We've covered this relatively fully. I hope you've gained some insight into the situation. And perhaps I could sum it up this way. Because we don't have much to work with here. Certainly don't have a full case study. But we could say this. If you think you might have autism and you're worried about how people see you and how a diagnosis will change your relationship with people, then chances are you don't have autism. You're not on the spectrum. If, on the other hand, your sister is writing this letter describing how you don't interact with people, you don't care to interact with people, you don't want to interact with people, you're happier when you're not interacting with people. They asked you to write this letter, but you said, no way, I don't care, I'm not writing that letter, I'm not doing it, and you might have autism. You see what I'm saying? Autism is a withdrawal from this world. It's a movement away from the external world to the internal world. And it's indicative of not caring about the external world. You don't care. And where do other people live? They live in the external world. Hopefully we've given you some insight, as I said. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. You've enjoyed looking deeper at something, looking at it the way an academic or a therapist would look at it. If that's true, please subscribe, please like it, and pass it on to other people. There are many people out there that would appreciate the insight that we're offering, and maybe people who wouldn't like it at all. And that's okay with us. We're simply trying to help people that want help. Gain insight and education at a very deep level, at the level at which it exists professionally, academically, at universities. And maybe we've achieved that, and if we haven't, we're sorry. If we have, that's good. That's the goal, and we're going to keep posting. Look for our next video. I sincerely hope that all things have gone well for you, and it stays that way. So please take care. We'll see you soon.